Hey universe, Shaun from Zoobox here. Today we're going to be talking about 1984's Blood Simple, the feature film debut of the Coen Brothers. Oh yes, we talked about Hail Caesar last week. I think I talked about Hail Caesar. So I've been, Coen Brothers have been on my mind, just kind of thinking about their filmography. I was like, this is a good time. This is a good time, right? I actually had a different movie in my Blu-ray player. The screen or the menu came up. And then my wife said something to me, and where she sits is close to where my movie shelf is. And she said something, and I looked over, and then my eyes caught the Blood Simple spine. I was like, oh, I should watch Blood Simple. The fuck am I doing? Why am I going to watch this other thing? Let's watch Blood Simple. Which made my wife happier, because the thing I was putting on, she was like, why are we watching this? I was like, because you didn't say anything. It's directed by Joel and Ethan Coen, like I said, even though only Joel gets the director's credit. I believe at some point they just said fuck the guild, and now it's the Coen Brothers, or there's been at least a few Coen Brothers movies that have been called directed by the Coen Brothers. They obviously also wrote it, as they are one to do. I'm not sure if they've ever directed something they didn't write. Fact check me on that. I'm not sure. It stars John Getz, Frances McDormand, Dan Hedaya, M. Emmett Walsh, Sam Art Williams, Deborah Newman. That is kind of your main cast. The people with, larger speaking roles. It is let's read the old IMDb synopsis here. A rich but jealous man hires a private investigator to kill his cheating wife and her lover. However, nothing is simple when blood is involved. Now, if you've never seen this movie, it is a riff on noir stories, neo-noir. Everything from the way it's shot to the type of story it is to the type of things that happens. And the cool thing about watching this, especially because I'm so familiar with a lot of, their later movies, I've only watched Blood Simple, I think, one other time, probably when I bought the movie. And it's interesting to see how much they were already kind of formed as who they are as artists, even on their first go. Even the kind of story this is very much the same kind of stories that they're always kind of telling. They're always telling these kind of comedy of errors, the idea that one mistake kind of can spiral out into a million different variables and then causing other mistakes, and then the domino effect of action, the cause and effect. That's something that they clearly have a preoccupation with. It's a proclivity of theirs. They like to talk about stories like that, and they see those stories full of just interesting characters, very idiosyncratic, very specific types of people, usually cast with very specific kinds of actors. And Blood Simple is no different. One of the great performances in this movie is M. Emmett Walsh, who's like a character actor from that era. And from earlier, he was already kind of an old man. Like, he shows up in things, great little bit parts in like Blade Runner. He's the chief of police. He's in Critters. He's just in a bunch of stuff, and he's a great screen presence. And I've always really enjoyed his presence in movies. And they make great use of him, and they wrote the part for him specifically. And I think Frances McDormand as well. They were part of kind of not a collective, but they were all friends. Holly Hunter was part of this crew. Sam Raimi was part of this crew. Actually, Sam Raimi is the one that kind of got them off their ass and said, yo, just take this thing door to door and try to raise money for it. And the way they raised money for it was they cut a fake trailer, which is the same thing that Raimi did when he was trying to raise money for the original Evil Dead. He made I think it's called, From the Woods. It Came from the Woods. And then he did this like proof of concept short that he could show people. Like, this is what the movie will the vibe we're going for, what we're going to try to achieve. And the Blood Simple trailer, so they cut like a fake trailer. Actually, one of Sam Raimi's, standards, Bruce Campbell, was in it. He plays the Dan Hedaya character. And they did that. They went door to door and they raised a bunch of money. And they raised about $750,000 over a year. And the rest is history, right? Actually, it's another one of those cases where they shopped this around to studios, and every studio turned it down, and they had to figure out how to get it out, even to release it themselves. Like, it took a couple years for them to figure out how to get it released. which is interesting. And that's always the case with things that are special, ahead of their time. Blood Simple is, in a weird way, part of a paradigm shift for film, because it's a very cleverly made movie. I think some of the plot elements are a little contrived, but in fairness to the Coens, what they're pulling from, kind of noir, dark stories, like the noir detective novels, there is tons of contrivance and kind of weird motivations, and doesn't always add up all the time. But then that also goes to the kind of characters they like to write. They like to write people that are kind of stupid or overconfident in some weird way, and then they always end up paying some sort of greater price for it. Like I said, like their voice is so strong even here. You can see everything that came after this, like how this is ground zero. And it's super fascinating from that perspective. And they already were kind of masters, I mean, granted, I think they were, pulling from everything that they ever enjoyed, every movie that they ever liked. There's a lot of pulling from those, a lot of tricks, a lot of cool, interesting transitions they would do. The kind of the steady cam work. It's the movie. It always feels like it's kind of moving a little bit. It feels almost voyeuristic at times. It was really interesting. Like, there is a pathology to the way they made the movie. That is very specific. It's not doesn't feel like a low budget movie where you just kind of have to get what you have to get. I don't know. Maybe their pre-production was just really intense, and they really knew what they were looking for when they were ready to shoot. They were ready to shoot, and they could execute on that, and they did a fantastic job. I'm sure they feel like it could have been better or whatever, but it's their first movie. Come on. Everybody in the movie is great too. Like I mentioned, Emmett Walsh is a ton of fun. He's a great Coen Brothers character. And he is him and Dan Hedaya are the most like Coen Brothery characters that, the kind of characters that you would see in their later work. Frances McDormand and John Getz as the wife and the adulterers. they feel a little bit more stock. They're not stock in a bad way, I mean, but they don't feel as specific. They're not as big. They're more like kind of normal. And there's an interesting juxtaposition between like the Coen Brothers version of the world and the regular world, and they're somewhere straddling the line. They kind of have to like come up against the Coen Brothers version of the world, these two people. And it made for an interesting dynamic. And I think everybody plays off of each other really well. There's some great scenes. I think, like I said, Emmett Walsh and Dan Hedaya, they get the best material to work with. They feel, those scenes feel the most like alive in a weird way. And the way that the Coen Brothers scenes feel alive, the kind of work that they do. John Getz is also really good, and I really like the arc of his character. It's really interesting. But there's so many things though that like were mildly frustrating when I was watching it, in terms of characters, like why they would do things the way they did them, like withholding information because he assumes that the person he's talking to knows what he's talking about, so they just never talk about it, and he thinks she's being coy, using him. Yeah. So it's really a interesting movie from on a myriad of different levels. I think it works just as a movie, separate as a Coen Brothers thing. But what makes it most interesting to me is it being part of their filmography, and I love the way they execute on the story, because there's not a lot to the story. It's pretty simple. It's pretty a simple kind of I don't know, murder mystery thriller. It's got that kind of vibe to it. It's got a great score. And you got to give all credit to Barry Sonnenfeld. This is one of his earlier movies, I believe, before he, became a director of like Men in Black and stuff. He's a great DP, and he did great work here. That is what came across the most to me about the look, and because the way they use shadows and lights, but not just that, but then also, like I said, like the Steadicam work, the way that people are framed against the landscapes of Texas where they are, these flat plains in the in the more industrialized areas of Texas. Very cool. It's got a very cool noir mystery thriller look to it. A lot of great use of shadows, like I said. I mean, every scene just feels like it's just so picturesque, but it still got this like grit to it because it's a low budget movie, so it still has this this great texture to it. Everything feels real in a weird way, heightened, sure, but real. And they did a lot of clever stuff. They did a lot of clever transitions. There's a great scene with Frances McDormand. She goes and sees like the aftermath of the murder that takes place, and she's like looking at all of the different elements of the murder scene, and it kind of goes in on her face, and they do this cool transition where she just lays back, and then she's in her bed. So just cool trick stuff like that. I loved it. Yeah, I loved revisiting it. I'm glad I did. Glad I caught it. I'm glad I saw it in the corner of my eye. I was like, oh, there it is. Blood Simple. Let's watch it. And it's one I don't know why I don't revisit it more. I revisit a lot of Coen Brothers movies all the time. I've seen some of their movies probably up to 10 times. Like Fargo. I've seen Fargo so many fucking times. But going back to what I said about this being the most interesting because it's part of their kind of their oeuvre, their filmography, is the thematic elements. This is like this would make a good pairing with No Country for Old Men. A lot of differences. But at the bottom of it, it kind of is about the same thing. This idea that nothing is simple when it comes to doing something like this. When you do something heinous or you commit a crime, the chance that it's just going to go off the rails and then it's going to create all of these other conflicts, all of these other challenges. It's just what happens. And I love that they do that in their movies. That's how they give the sense of escalation, Everything fractionalizes out and you can't account for everything. And that's kind of even part of one of the main themes of this story is like, if somebody asks you to do something fucked up, can you trust them not to rat you out like after you've done the deed? Can you just trust the people around you? Can you trust the people to be honest? That's what the characters that Frances McDormand and John Getz play. Can you have a communication? Can you have a communication? Can you communicate? Can you talk? Like, because so many of these things are avoided if you just kind of laid it out there, right? It's one of these like these universal human flaws that they like to explore in their movies, and it's a great example of that. I mean, Blood Simple's like that. Fargo, obviously, Fargo's like I would say Fargo's a better movie. I don't know if I'd say it's a much better movie, because Blood Simple's really good. But Fargo's more just the comedy version, the comedy of errors version, like in the darkest way possible. Very, very dark comedy, which is true with a lot of their stuff. They have, so I would say, there's Blood Simple, Fargo, The Man Who Wasn't There, No Country for Old Men. Those would be like a good kind of, I don't know, movie marathon you wanted to do. You wanted to do like a festival night, have your own mini film festival, a retrospective at your house. That would make a great night. That would be awesome. I would be down. Do you guys want to do that? You guys want to do that, all you ghosts? All these people I talk to all the time that aren't really here? I would do it. I'd do it. Yeah. But even outside of those films that I just mentioned, a lot of the themes are the same. A lot of the structure is very similar in a lot of their stuff. Even in their comedies. I mean, that's even their straight comedies, that's what makes them interesting. They have like this cynical view of humanity that doesn't feel oppressively cynical. It doesn't feel like hopeless all the time, but they're realists. I think one of their best examples of this is like a Serious Man, and then maybe Inside Llewyn Davis. Those movies, if they have done anything that is specifically about nihilism in a weird abstract way, it's those movies. Which A Serious Man is so good. I haven't watched it in a few years, but I should revisit that at some point in the near future. Just talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, that's a good one. All right, everybody. Well, that's going to do it for me today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you would like to know more about Zoobox, you want to stay up to date with everything, check out the links in the description. We got Facebook, Instagram. You got my personal Twitter. Also, if you have any suggestions, you would like to see me talk about something specific, a movie that you love or a movie you don't like, I don't know. It doesn't matter. There's a good chance I could get around to it. So just let me know. All right, everybody. Have a good one.